truck drivers. Hey, truck drivers. It's your career success coach and truck driver recruiter, Frederica, here today to talk to SAP drivers about what they can do to get back to work as soon as possible. I know some of you have not done anything. You do not do drugs. You do not do alcohol, yet you have a SAP. First thing I want to ask you to do is take responsibility for the part you played in obtaining that SAP. That is going to be foundational if you're going to move forward. This is on your record for 5 years. And so what you need to do is you need to come to peace with it. This is not the end of the road. It may be difficult, but you can get past this. So that's tip number 1. Tip number 2, apply to as many companies as possible. And I know that this is a lot easier said than done because I've helped drivers with this process. And I will tell you that it is frustrating. But here's the key. Do your research before you start calling companies. There will be companies that will say on their website or on places like Indeed, Glassdoor, or other large job aggregate sites that they do not take SAP drivers. You do not want to waste your time and call those companies because they have resolved already that they're not working with SAP drivers, and most likely it's because of the cost of insurance. So what you're going to do is look for companies that do not say that they don't take SAP drivers, and you're going to call them. Reach out to those companies, talk with them, and see if you have an opportunity with them. Now, one of the things I've heard online is that when you call, you should be saying immediately that you have a SAP. To me, this does not give you a fair shot at that job or to win over that recruiter or hiring manager. I like to tell drivers, when you get a recruiter on the phone, the first thing you want to do is you want to establish rapport with that person. You want to talk about how long you've been working in the trucking industry. You want to talk about your specialized skills and some of the great things that you've accomplished as a truck driver. Once you have buy-in from that person, then you want to say, the challenge I'm having right now is that I do have a SAP. I have done the counseling. I've done everything that I can to get back on the road, and I am really ready to turn a new leaf over. And I'd like to see if you'd give me an opportunity. This way you connect with that person and then get in touch with their human side and not just get a yes or a no. And so that's tip number 2. Tip number 3 is going to be call mom and pop companies. Smaller companies are going to be more lenient with truck drivers. Most of the times they don't have as many drivers calling them, so they would be more than happy to give you a second chance. Tip number 4, look for companies that have a hard time hiring truck drivers. You do not want to go to companies where drivers are constantly hounding them about jobs. You want companies where they hardly get calls. Those companies are going to be in situations sometimes where they're desperate for a driver and they would take you. So companies that are in the oil field space, moving company space, companies that haul sand, companies that haul rock, aggregate companies, dump truck companies, companies that do waste management, LTL companies, companies that require you to do a lot of hands-on work. Yes, some of you will not want to do hands-on, but you may have to do it in the meantime until you get past that 5 years or at least 3 years in where you have solid background and solid work history and another company will take you. Tip number 5. I would get my own return to duty if I was having a hard time with a company bringing me on. The clock is ticking down on you, and you do not want to be out of the trucking industry for a very long time, especially with what's going to be happening in November of this year, where the FMCSA will be downgrading people's CDL. You want to get back to work as soon as possible. And so what I would do is I would find a third-party consortium that does the return to duty process. Now, don't go find anyone online who's saying, oh, I can do a return to duty for you. No, you want to find legitimate companies. There's a company that's called USDrugTestCenters.com. I know that they do it. You can have your SAP provider send over your return to duty instructions to them, and they will do the follow-up testings for you. You will have to pay for the test, you will have to pay for someone to observe it, and you will have to pay for them to put the data in the FMCSA and update it. But that is another way that you can get your return to duty. If you have your return to duty, it is much easier for you to find a company that will take you. A lot of companies do not take SAP drivers because it is a very tedious process. The administration of getting the return to duty drug screening set up and entered into the clearinghouse is just too much for some companies. And so that is what I would do if I was having a hard time finding a company to do the return to duty for me. Tip number 6, companies that are owned by foreign individuals can prove to be very beneficial to SAP drivers. I know that sometimes it's a challenge, to work with some of these foreign companies, but those companies sometimes have insurance that are not based in the US. And because of that, those insurance companies are not so concerned about SAP. So the rates of insurance are not as exorbitant as US companies. It costs a lot of money to put a SAP driver on. It's about 40% more in insurance premiums for a SAP driver than it is for a driver that has a clean MVR. And so for this reason, I personally believe that is why a lot of trucking companies do not hire SAP drivers. It's just too costly. And so a foreign company may prove beneficial to you. Tip number 7. This is going to be my favorite and the tip that I use the most. Go to the safer.fmcsa.gov website. This website contains the database of all of the MC holders in the United States. And you're going to put in one single keyword. You want to use words that are related to the trucking industry. I would put in a word like trucking, carrier, logistics, even the name of the state that you live in, or even a large city nearby you. This is the way a lot of people name their companies. Once you search by name with that single word in there, the website is going to populate a list of companies with that word in it. This is going to be a tedious task, but I can tell you, you will have access to companies that will say yes to you. So I would go through the list. I would look for companies that have 5 to about 30 trucks, and I would call them. These companies, a lot of people don't even know about them, so they do not have drivers hounding them for jobs. I would call them and I would say, hey, I'm looking for a second chance. Remember what I told you before, how you're going to approach this. You're not just going to say, I'm a SAP driver. You're going to give them your elevator speech, and you're going to say that you're looking for a second chance. Now, while you're waiting to get your return to duty, I want to encourage you to look for an alternative job so that you can keep money in your pocket and you're not frustrated. A lot of times, SAP drivers end up coming back to work and taking awful jobs because they're strapped for cash. Desperation is what causes exploitation. I do have some companies that I do know about that are hiring SAP drivers, and I will share them with you, but I want you to remember this. A company can be hiring SAP drivers today, and because someone sees a video like this, everyone's calling, so they become inundated with calls, and they can't take every SAP driver. And so in a few weeks or a few months, they may say, we're not able to take SAP drivers. And so don't let that discourage you. Don't get the attitude that, oh, she told me about this company, but they don't hire drivers. They could have been hiring drivers at this time, but they're not hiring at the time you see this video. And so these companies that I'm going to share with you are hiring now. Company number 1 is CFI. Company number 2 is Sweet Express. Company number 3, Super Ego. Company number 4 is J Brothers Logistics. Company number 5 is Northwoods Transportation. These 3 other companies that I'm going to mention to you, they do take SAP drivers, but you would already need to complete your return to duty and all of your follow-up drug screenings. Those three companies are Cargo Empire, Pacific Logistics, that's PACIFIC, and Midwest Cargo. I do not represent or work with any of the companies, so do your due diligence. If you're a SAP driver and you've gotten back to work, please share with us in the comments below what you did. It may be able to help a driver. Remember to like the video and share it. You may help someone with it. Subscribe as well. If you're looking for someone to help you accelerate your career, reach out to me. I'd like to see if we're a fit to work together. Thank you. God bless. And keep on trucking.